Most people think they have a financial plan, but really they have nothing more than just a series of basic assumptions in an Excel file. And the problem is many people who have amassed wealth, let's just say over $2 million, don't know how to do retirement planning right. Many people try to spend as little as possible in retirement because they fear running out of money. And even though they may never run out of money, I would still consider this approach a plan failure because they never knew what they could actually spend with confidence. But we helped Jane know with confidence what she could spend and the areas she could improve to increase her chances for success. Jane is a single lady who was looking to retire within the next year, but was concerned she didn't have enough and she didn't know what she could spend to ensure she never ran out of money. And this was a big problem because retirement was at her doorstep, so we had to move fast to ensure she was set up before making the plunge. Sure, she could delay things longer, but she didn't want to if she didn't have to. Now, by most standards, she had done an excellent job saving and getting herself to this point. She was age 63 and worked in the defense contract industry, making about $160,000 per year. She lived in Michigan, which was a bit a ways away from our firm here in sunny San Diego, but she had no problem working with us virtually. She had done a great job putting away money and had around $1.2 million in pre-tax accounts consisting of IRAs and pre-tax 401ks. And she was saving about 15% of her salary into her 401k pre-tax, which comes to about $24,000 per year. She also had $400,000 in post-tax accounts, which consisted of her Roth IRA and a brokerage account of around $700,000. She had a healthy reserve of cash with around $80,000 at the bank and owned her home free and clear that was worth about $550,000. The only guaranteed source of income she had for retirement was Social Security, which was $2,900 a month at her full retirement age of 67. In regards to expenses, before we showed her what she could spend, we needed to determine if that would match her current reality because she did not want to go backwards in lifestyle if she didn't have to. And this is when we use our Live, Give, Owe, Grow model to determine what she is currently spending to live the life that she wants. And so as we can see, like I mentioned earlier, Jane's salary is about $160,000 per year. And then what we do off of that is calculate employment taxes. So that would be things like Social Security tax, Medicare tax, and then we're also calculating her current federal tax amount as well as Michigan state taxes. Of course, taxes in retirement are going to be calculated when we start that distribution phase, but we just want to get a snapshot of where she stands today. On her 401k pre-tax contributions, $24,000, so we have that there. Right now, she's spending about $6,000 per year on travel, and we plan for that to continue throughout retirement, so we can see the travel expense there. No debt, and then she is giving about $1,000 a month or $12,000 per year, and this is also an expense that she would like to continue throughout retirement. And the whole reason we do this model is to get a snapshot of what her spending looks like while she's still working. So again, if we take her total income minus taxes, minus savings, minus the travel, minus giving, what we're left with is a current living expense of about $78,000 per year. That comes out to about $6,500 per month. But there were some new expenses we needed to account for not reflected in her current spending. We needed to account for a new vehicle she expected to need within the next several years, and so we estimated a cost of $50,000 adjusted for inflation and include that in her plan. And we also needed to account for private medical since she planned to retire at age 64, 1 year before Medicare starts at 65, and we estimated that to be about $1,000 per month until Medicare kicked in. Of course, one of her main objectives was to determine not just if she could retire within the year, but if she did, how much she could spend. But we also uncovered a few more pieces of information that wouldn't have come up if we didn't learn more about her relationship with money. Jane came from a family that never had much. She watched her parents struggle and vowed that she would never be in that position herself. Her mom lived to the age of 96, and because Jane was healthy, she knew she could live a very long life, especially with medical advances and future improvements. So we wanted to assume in her plan that she lived much longer than the average person. Jane also did not have any form of protection against potential long-term care health events, and although it's impossible to perfectly predict, we wanted to ensure that she had a buffer of about $500,000 adjusted for inflation for a potential long-term care health event. It was important that she never became a burden to others. So this was a snapshot of where she stood today and the foundation of the plan that we created for her. Now, with the facts of her current reality in place, we can now help her understand if she could retire and answer the question, how much can I spend in retirement? But based on the income she needed, we analyzed what she could do to lower her lifetime tax liability. Because if we can keep more money in her pocket, that ultimately means more income for her. And through our analysis, we were able to quantify the value of doing some strategic Roth conversions once she retired. So when we talked to her, we looked at doing Roth conversions up to the 22% bracket. There are some other options that would theoretically save her a lot more in taxes over retirement, like even converting up to the 24% bracket or even the 32% bracket. The primary problem with that is just the sheer volume of taxes that would be due in any given year would just be a lot. And honestly, it was just a little bit more than she could stomach. But we did feel like 22% was enough where it would make a substantial difference over her lifetime, but also she could manage the tax bills year to year. So again, what we chose was doing Roth conversions up to the 22% bracket. And what I am showing you are total taxes saved. These are real dollars. These are not future inflated dollars. So it gives us a better sense as to what we would be saving. So doing Roth conversions up to the 22% bracket, projected tax savings of about $485,000 over her lifetime. And of course, if that's tax money that she's saving, she doesn't have to send it to the government or the state. She gets to keep it in her own pocket, which means her total net income could also increase by about $485,000. And what we can do here is we can just see this is what her total tax would look over her lifetime. So compared to the traditional route of taxable, tax deferred, and then tax free, where in the yellow bars, you might actually pay less tax initially, you pay a lot more tax on the back end of your life. Where if we do some Roth conversions, we are going to front load some taxes, but you'll see it's kind of smoothed out, and then eventually we don't have any tax liability. And if we look at the break-even point, what we can see is that that break-even point is about 2050. Again, we're assuming that Jane's going to live a really long life. She has the family longevity, she's in good health, so I think it's reasonable to assume that she could live a long time. Therefore, it makes that break-even point really important, because if she only needs to live until 2050, what that means is that the Roth conversions are going to help her pay a lot less tax over her lifetime, especially the longer she lives. And because we planned to do Roth conversions, we knew we needed to come up with the money to pay the tax bill on these conversions. So we needed to adjust her investment strategies. So with those Roth conversions in mind, what we can do now is take a look at the big picture cash flow to figure out how much are we actually withdrawing from the portfolio. And what we can see here is that in the first several years of retirement, right, 56,000 withdrawal, then 131, 179, right, we're going to be anticipating to pull north of $600,000 from her brokerage account, both to meet her current living expense and lifestyle needs, but also to pay the tax bill from the Roth conversions. And so what we did is we built her brokerage account to be very conservative, to have about 5 years worth of withdrawals in a more stable war chest of cash and bonds. And of course, she was a little nervous about selling stock and missing out on potential gains. So what we did is in her IRA, we aligned it to be more growth oriented, and her Roth IRA being the most aggressive, since it had a longer time horizon until we were planning to pull money from that account. And now with that updated strategy, such as the Roth conversion and realigning her investments in place, we could see that based upon her current needs, she was on track to retire. So if we look at her income goal, right, everything we calculated based upon her living expenses, the needs for travel, the needs for private medical care, we can see what her desired and essential living expenses are. And based upon all the adjustments that we've made and realigning her portfolio, theoretically, we're proposing that she could have income up to $11,100, right? So we're on track here. We know that, hey, based upon what you spend, it looks good because we're giving yourself a little bit of a buffer here. If you did need some more income, it looks like we could create it. And then the other thing that we want to do is actually take a more granular look at that first year of retirement. So again, if she's retiring at 64, Her birthday was partway through the year, so we are going to have some working income in that first half, first half of the year, and then she would fully rely upon her portfolio in the back halves. But again, this gives us a more granular look to say, what would it look like in that first year? We'd have some income coming from her salary, some from the brokerage account, doing Roth conversions, things like that, a lot of taxes. So all this is getting accounted for within her plan, and we can see exactly where the income is coming from. And now, of course, this is just a snapshot in time. Markets could change. And because we were planning to delay her Social Security until age 70, based on her potential longevity and to provide her with a higher baseline of guaranteed income over her life, we needed to heavily rely on her portfolio for several years. And this is something that the 4% rule misses and cannot account for. And I've talked about issues with the 4% rule in more detail in other videos, but the part of the reason we are able to take such high withdrawals early in retirement is if she follows a dynamic and risk-based guardrails approach to creating income. Because although this is the income that we're planning on creating in the first months of retirement, we need to keep a watchful eye on the portfolio and the risk to see if adjustments need to be made. So for example, what we're seeing here is that, hey, this is the income that we're expecting to create and the income that you can expect to have, but we can't just bury our heads in the sand. So if markets were to drop by, let's say, 36%, or more so than markets, your specific portfolio were to drop by 36%, what we can see here is that would equate to needing a $500 reduction in monthly income to help reduce the chances of you ever running out of money. But on the flip side, if markets happen to do really well and your portfolio increases by 13%, what that can do is that can translate into a monthly increase of income by about $1,200 a month. Now, what you choose to do with that is Jane's choice, right? She could choose to take that higher income if she wanted to, or she could just say, you know what? Everything's going great. I don't need that income. Let's plan to not increase my income. And what that'll do is actually give her even more of a buffer, so she has even more downside that the portfolio needs to drop before she would ever need to make some adjustments. But now that she knew how much she could spend and the guardrails to ensure she reduced the chances of running out of money or ended up with more money at the end of her life than what she started with, there was one more critical area she needed. Because you know the old saying, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And Jane was confident in her plan. This is more clarity than she's ever had before, but she still wasn't satisfied because there was this lingering fear of what would happen if things didn't go as planned. You know, like what would happen if we were to experience another major market event like the Great Financial Crisis? And her concern was not uncommon. Many people, even after they have a retirement plan, can still be stressed because although the plan looks good today, what happens if we have a really bad stretch in retirement? So what we do is we stress tested her unique plan with all the different variables, expenses, and toggles against some major historical events. So what we can do is we can take her specific plan, and then what we'll do is we'll stress test it against some of the worst periods in history. So what we're going to say here is, hey, based upon the plan, the income plan that we've created for you, what would happen if you were to retire right before the Great Financial Crisis? Now, what we can see is that, yeah, she would have needed to make some cuts. At one point, she needed to cut up to $2,500 a month, okay, if she were to retire right before the Great Financial Crisis with this current income plan. So there's a couple things here. Number one, she probably would be cutting back on the travel. But the other thing too, and this is important to remember, is the income plan that we have initially built was based upon the assumption that she would be taking out that higher income. If you remember, we looked at her current needs versus proposed income. It's planning on that proposed income. So the fact that she may not need all that income, and if she is able to take a little bit less based upon her current needs, would add even more security to her plan. So a $2,500 cut in reality to her may not be as much. But nonetheless, this does give you a lot of confidence to know, hey, can I actually survive a storm like that? Would I be able to cut, take a hard look at my expenses, what would leave the budget? But the nice thing is that we can also see when those increases would come about. So we can see after time, we would get back on plan, we would have some increases, and the portfolio would actually be able to create a lot more income than we initially planned. And again, to her, because she didn't have any debts, she knew that she could cut back and the possibility of cutting back was better than the alternative, which was working longer. Now, of course, going forward, things won't always look exactly the same as the past, but with her plan in place, which to this day is constantly reviewed and monitored to ensure she is on course, it gave her the confidence she needed to retire. Now, earlier I talked about calculating Jane's living expenses in retirement, and for her plan, it worked. She was planning on spending less than her plan projected it was able to create. But too often people completely miscalculate their expenses, and it's the number one reason retirement gets derailed. And I'd argue the Live, Give, Grow model is one of the most powerful yet simple ways to know what you spend. My business partner Anthony breaks down in detail how the most common methods of calculating retirement expenses is flawed and the better way to do that. You can watch that right here.